Good day. Part 3, communication in relationships. So in part 1, we talked about all relationships and the purpose of those relationships in converting what always comes in as negative affect, the effect of the environment. Even the air conditioning running might be annoying to us, but we don't let it consume us and overcome our lives. We still seek to operate at high efficacy levels in which we achieve self-esteem for ourselves, which is love, and we create excellent experience for other people that are benefiting from our existence, which is love. We're always converting through communication the effect of the environment, which is defined by our biological, social, and psychological individual experience, to positive affect, which is equivalent to love. Now, the confusion comes in always in how society defines love and the creation of an alignment that love is only equivalent to interpersonal physical relationships of intimacy nature, which is not the case. So the relationship changes based upon the level of the relationship. The communication as well changes depending upon the level of the relationship. The type of the relationship between people defines the communication. So one person fulfills the other person's needs. Certainly that comes to mind in interpersonal relationships, but even in the work, a one-to-many, where one person is fulfilling the needs of a team in an interpersonal way, but in a group way as well, is dependent upon communication and a symmetrical relationship in which the partners view themselves as equal. And when we say view themselves as equal, we're talking about the support, encouragement, and validation. If there is invalidation, if there is competition, if there is demeaning contexts of exploitation, then those do not fit in within the definition of a relationship. Even in the workplace. Context level is important. Information is communicated through many aspects of interaction. So it isn't just the words used. Now, in our social media mediated context, then we rely heavily on the words and the meaning of those words. But as we talked about in defining the word love, we know different people might have different definitions of those words. And in overall communication, we get a more comprehensive view. So hence an in-person class is always going to communicate more information than even the best online class by the most skilled presenter with lots of experience and training in delivering online content. Because of body language, because of eye context, because of the ability to not only see my body language, but for my ability to see the audience's reaction and react myself to those reactions, which may cause me to regroup, which may cause me to communicate again in a different way that increases understanding beyond the literal meaning of the words. This is called dialectics. Dialectic theory is the push and pull found in everyday types of relationships. It is a comprehensive interpersonal interaction. Life is a social process of dialectics. Relationship management includes tension management. May not be fully resolvable, but with proper cues, red flags, and information, we can eliminate misunderstandings and create understandings in our communication dialogue by watching the dialectic tension and using skills to address that tension. Some of those skills you might want to have a discussion about, but many involve the rephrasing, observing, listening, and in a full-blown communications class, we would discuss how do we send and receive, and how do we understand what was sent and received effectively, and then how do we react to how that send and receive mechanism occurred. So all interpersonal relationships in all contexts are in a constant state of flux, contradiction, improvement, and modification in order to ensure the highest level of efficacy. If it is not, or if there's an intentional effort for communication to be controlled, control is an exploitation. So control is not what we seek, but obviously people will communicate at the level of their trust. It is not realistic to expect that early in a relationship, when high levels of dialectic tension are involved, that trust will be high as a default. The tension is natural and inevitable until trust occurs, and then hopefully the tension is replaced with openness. So under relational dialectics theory, that we have a number of continuums. The continuum between separation and integration. Separate thoughts, integrated thoughts. Predictability and novelty. Predictability is understanding one another in a way that we might be able to assume what they're going to say. Dangerous because we miss the novelty of the next innovation that they might have to offer. Openness and closeness based on trust. Similarity and difference based upon culture. Intergenerational transmission of likenesses. And the ideal versus the real. What do I expect from other people versus what can I realistically expect? If I operate my relationship based upon what I expect, I may be superimposing something into that relationship that does not exist. And you can think through the risks of doing that. So how do we manage dialectic tensions? One is denial. Denial might lead towards argument. It might be that in early stages of dialectic tension that there's limited trust, and we might be in a engagement, particularly within an engagement in which we're bouncing ideas off one another and surprised that our ideas conflict. And in doing so, we may need to make the decision to decline on the relationship, pause, take more time, or potentially disconnect. There's risk in either moving too fast or disconnecting too early. Disorientation is related to the individual's response to anxiety. And we've already spoken about the effect of anxiety on performance. The fight, flight, and freeze comes from overwhelming anxiety, which leads to disorientation. Alternation is individuals choose one end on different occasions. So alternation is strictly the same as what ego taught us, in that we operate differently based upon the sociological environment in which we are in. There are different sociological standards expected in college, in the classroom, than online. Different sociological standards expected with our family and friends than possibly at church or in our religious group or other institution that we participate in. Our ego allows us to alternate between occasions and function effectively in alignment with the requirements of those sociological groups. The risk is, to the extent that we subrogate the individual, we eliminate our id and mask to participate in a group that we are not in alignment with, we risk more anxiety, which can lead to other problems in our mental health. Constantly recalibrating in order to reframe the situation and the perspective, hopefully reframing in ways that are in alignment with our values and that build trust. Segmentation, individuals compartmentalize different areas, particularly for differing social groups. Balance, individuals manage and compromise their needs. Providing balance is an important construct to mental health, meaning supporting who one is in addition to functioning effectively based upon the influence of the superego, which requires us to modify our id and display a certain ego response in alignment with the sociological needs of the community that we're participating in. If that community's values are not in alignment with our individual id, intrinsic values and self, then disconnection might preserve our mental health. But that's called integration, blending in. And reaffirmation of other people's differences is massively important to displaying validation, support, and encouragement, the core of dialectic relationships. Self-disclosure is the expression of our values, our internal selves, in order to support truth and trust in the relationship so it can develop. Absent of that, we tend towards exploitation, meaning on a continuum, a relationship that's not based on disclosure and trust, but fully on control, is an exploitive relationship in which there's a pretending occurring, in which a person is exhibiting a personality in order to influence another person. It's called objectification, and that is not supportive of the relationship and of humanity. It is strictly an exploitation. But we do need to maintain social control, because what is expected in certain social circumstances is not the same thing in other social circumstances. And we need to have awareness of those expectations in order to be able to function in our social frameworks. What a person considers when considering the level of trust in a particular relationship is a risk-benefit relationship. What do I have to disclose in order for this relationship to grow? And it is dependent upon the type and strength of the relationship, which is the trust. but is necessary and relevant to establish reciprocity in that relationship. Over a period of time, the 2 years that an intimate relationship is required in order to achieve full knowledge of the intrinsic self of another person, the relationship will break down if there is a sense that the reciprocity is not based upon trust. And the red flags of inconsistency can be detected very readily, except in a very skilled, manipulative person. Now, most very skilled and manipulative people will not be able to maintain for 2 years. A person that can maintain for 2 years is generally considered on the edge or sociopathical. But the amount of disclosure is dependent upon the depth of the information. Once a person develops that the relationship is intellectual, then there might be a deep discussion that occurs relative to the pros and cons of John Paltra's theory of existentialism that is safe and comfortable. And even if there's disagreement when we read the book Colonialism and Neocolonialism, because there's controversy, there's a basis of trust that is developed over time that doesn't necessarily mean that that one nuance of communication destroys the entire, that new context destroys the entire environment of that relationship. So what do people do if they don't want to disclose? Meaning they are the relationship is one-sided or manipulative. They either deceive or lie, which should be detectable eventually. They equivocate. They don't answer, which simply means that they have taken upon themselves to choose to not engage at that level with this relationship. More trust is needed. How do we improve our communication skills? This is essentially important. It's important to know how we explore one's needs, desires, and motivations within a relationship. It is exceptionally important to know how we left childhood, either secure, which is leading us to other secure people, and easily detecting those that are anxious, avoidant, or disorganized, or to a lesser extent, anxious and avoidant, and attracting other people with similar levels of anxiety. Now, this is normal because an avoidant person attracting a secure person is going to be quite a challenge. An avoidant person will need to consciously develop skills through communication in order to get the trust of a secure person, to show that their motivations are pure and that trust and openness is possible within this relationship. The idea in a dating relationship with goals in mind is an additional challenge because it's less organic. Less organic means a dating relationship means each of the parties have goals to develop an intimate or personal relationship, knowing that an intimate relationship doesn't necessarily have to be a long-term relationship, so the two are not necessarily coupled. The goals for an intimate relationship do not necessarily align. They could by coupling the two together, but they aren't necessarily aligned with the communication skills necessary for a long-term relationship. In a dating relationship, both parties understand that each of them are motivated towards a goal and that there are date goals. the more transparent those goals are, and that the elements of the intentionality of the strategy of this dating relationship will improve trust and the dyadic interplay between the two. So a common understanding of each other's goals is necessary to avoid an underlying feeling that one is being manipulated into something that their goals are not aligned with. And the transparency of underlying feelings, again, based upon trust and as the relationship develops. This is all very tenuous, and the idea that this could survive 2 years from a random selection perspective is low odds, and should be aware that that the risks are high of not achieving one's goals and feeling exploited through this process. In script theory, people understand the risks of the dating process and develop a pattern to circumvent random selection, build a script that includes their past, present experiences to achieve a better outcome in their future goals. In dating scripts, most people are transparent that they're using the script and that it's more of an interview narrative that is designed to sort likenesses in the individual and the goal in order to achieve a short-term or long-term relationship that is based upon a certain set of values. In script theory, people learn to understand their individual values and put together a scenario or a scripted mechanism in which they sort out whether the relationship is leading to the achievement of those goals. The script may be transparent and communicated as trust improves throughout the playing out of this script. Again, there's some level of risk of exploitation. Now, in understanding terms, we need to define how our text uses the terms sex and gender. And in most cases, sex is what was predetermined biologically, and gender is a person's tendency. So just understanding that there can be a variety of definitions that people have for different terms, this is how we're defining these terms for the purpose of this curriculum. Under Bem's role inventory, roles are masculine, feminine, androgynous, which means both, or undifferentiated, which means neither. So, a person whose biological sex is one seeks, under Bem's role inventory, to have a balanced set of what came from their childhood experiences and what is valuable in achieving their relationship goals of masculine and feminine experiences and understandings. The main gender perspectives in Western culture, this is strictly Western culture, is that males and females are psychologically different. The males are considered more dominant and females are than males. So how does gender impact interpersonal communication? Remember back to our definitions. Sex is genetic, according to the definition, where gender is being used to describe how that genetics evolved based upon sociological and psychological influences of caregivers and the Bronfenbrenner circles a person is exposed to after birth. So gender differences exist in interpersonal communication. Those who develop a feminine gender identity or a balanced with emphasis on the feminine side of the gender identity tend towards more nurturing, more empathy, articulate emotions and feelings more effectively, likely to sympathize with others more than those that are masculine. Those that are masculine view interpersonal relationships competitively and the potential for gaining something. So masculine interpersonal communication is going to seem more competitive and less empathetic, whereas female will seem more empathetic and less competitive. Noticing that this is not related to sex, genetics, it's related to individual development, that males and females on a continuum will have different levels of feminine and masculine balance. The goal, maybe we could say, is to be androgynous, in which each person then develops both empathy and healthy competition, because the extremes of femininity can lead to being susceptible to exploitation, whereas the extremes of masculinity can lead to the susceptibility to exploit others. And the exploitation on each end of the spectrum is not desirable for individual or social development. So how does gender-based interpersonal communication develop? Well, just like all other childhood development, begins at age 0, generally through about 22, but somewhere between 18 and 22, along Piaget's cognitive development phases. The sex differences from an interpersonal communication perspective are those that are inherited by chromosomes and genes. But then the primary caregiver, who is a primary role in development of an infant, up to about age 2 to 4, but age 2 for sure, has a large degree of influence on how that individual, that youth, develops the balance between male and female gender identity, gender expression. Individuals learn these roles very early in life, as you can see, and then begin to express these roles and interrelate with their social circles after those social circles expand in various ways along a Likert scale of absolute femininity and absolute masculinity, somewhere in the middle along that scale. And from a caregiver perspective, we might say that the caregiver who is instrumental in the development will develop a strong balance of those roles of masculine and feminine in every individual. Those that encourage, for instance, exploitation in masculine identities are limiting the person to having to overcome that development throughout their life, and the effect that that has on that individual, the other individuals that they interact with and communicate with, and their role in society.